Now, to talk a little bit about the hot shop and what's going on all around me down here. So the glass is being pulled out of our furnace. We're using the furnace on your right-hand side, and behind this door lies all the glass. It's about the same temperature as molten lava, and we're melting approximately 1,000 pounds of molten glass. Behind this door only lies clear glass, and if we want to use colored glass, well, we have to add that separately. So the color is brought to us in bar form. Depending on what we're making, we can use a full bar, or in this case, we can just use a small amount. The colors themselves are made by adding different metals of the periodic table of elements. So a different metal will produce a different color. White in this case is made by antimonium, but to make a blue, we will add cobalt. Green, it's chromium or iron. And if you like red and pink, well, we add gold. Gold produces red and pink glass, which makes it some of the more expensive in the color industry. And you'll notice that when you look at the price, you'll pay a little bit more due to that gold content. Now that we have that color right on top of the pipe, we're gonna gather clear glass on the surface. When you gather clear glass has a property of magnification, which means it will magnify the underlying color and make it look like it's solid color. Although we now know it's not gonna be that solid color, rather, it's a little trick that glass plays. It is possible to have glass in your home made by solid color, but the majority of the time, when you have a colored cup, it may look solid color all the way around, but in fact, it is just a thin layer of color that is sandwiched in between clear layers. And most glass will play this trick on you. Right now, the team is busy producing long strands of glass. We call this cane. Again, we have white color on the very inside and clear glass on the outside. This cane will be stretched from one side of the room to the opposite, which is the reason why we have these ladders on the ground. Now, these are cooling racks where the strands of glass can lay on. We see that some cane has already been pulled. We are going to use that later on in the process, but we are going to continue to make more of this cane work that we can use later on. When you go through our gallery in our store, if you see pieces with straight lines or even just lines of glass, chances are they used cane to create those pieces. Now we can see the process down here. We already have the solid color and clear glass on the surface. Now that clear glass, of course, will magnify the underlying color, but if we start from the beginning, the process down here, the solid color is right on the bubble or right on top. Now, all the glass that we see now is being pulled out of this furnace on your right-hand side. The furnace is holding approximately 1,000 pounds of molten glass and is on 24/7, 365 days a year. So this furnace is never turned off. Now, it doesn't take any breaks, weekends off, vacations, or sick days, or even sick leave. This piece of equipment is always turned on. Now, the rods that we use here in the hot shop floor are specifically made for offhand glass making, which means they're made to work with the extremely high heat. So again, the bar, that pole is made out of stainless steel, which is a very poor conductor of heat. So the heat is not transferred all the way through the rods, and stainless steel is a very poor conductor of heat. But notice where his hands are kept actually. Towards the tip of the rod, it begins to discolor. You see the dull gray and black towards the tip of the rod, and we're not placing our hand in that area. That's the danger zone. In that section, the rod is hot. So we'll keep our hands directly behind that area. Typically, if you see the discoloration of the rod and it's no longer shiny or stainless steel, that's a good sign not to touch the rod in that area. On this end, we've gathered a little bit of glass and created what's called a post. The post is the opposite rod that we will use to stretch this piece of glass from one way to another. So this is going to be the handle on which we attach it on. The next step is to, again, stretch it out from one end of the room. And to do that, we want to have about the diameter of a number 2 pencil. So we want to even pull all the way around. We don't want different diameters throughout our piece. And to do that, we're heating it up, but we're also quenching the tip on water. So as we roll on the sides, we're cooling down the surface, and then right before, we will quench the very tip on water. Since that tip is the first thing to enter the chamber, it will always be the hottest point of the glass. If we don't quench the tip, well, the tip will tend to pull out thinner than the rest of the diameter. Once we have the proper heat, we'll come right on over, attach it to our post. In this move, we are determining diameter. Once the diameter has been determined, we will then begin of stretching the glass from one point under another. Now remember that the glass is white, but for the majority, it's gonna look red and orange. Now the section we see down in the center has already cooled down, and we are stretching the length from the end you see down here. Mass likes to hold heat, which means this is the area that we're getting the next length from. As you can tell, the center part here has already cooled down and is no longer being stretched. And notice that we see that true white color down here, but on this end, we're still seeing that red and orange color hue due to the heat, of course. And just like taffy, right, isn't that quite amazing? Glass is an amorphous solid. It is one of the only materials with its own properties, which means it acts like a solid, but it can also act like a liquid when hot. And it's a very special material that glass is. Some people believe that glass should have its own proper state of matter called the glaseous state. Now we are going to continue these pulls. So we have the next one down here on this end. However, this does not yet have enough clear glass, so we'll take another layer of clear to give us sufficient amount of mass to work with. So are we ready to see that again? Is everyone, yeah, you guys down to see that again? Well, we're going to continue that fun down here. We're taking another dip of glass right on that top layer. It's hard to believe, but that mass will eventually be stretched out as what we just saw here earlier today. These sections of glass, notice all we use is a pair of tweezers. This pair of tweezers is made out of steel, and just by touching the glass, it cracks, it can break due to that thermal shock. Now, I believe this glass should be cold to the touch. Again, mass likes to hold heat, but at this state, the glass is thin enough. Still a little too warm, but here in a little bit, we can bring it over and show what exactly we made. Repeat that? It's fine. Well, just like last time, we're going to repeat that step. We've created a post, the opposite rod, that we will stretch the glass with one another. Just like last time, notice how mass holds heat. The reddest part of the glass is where the mass is pulled out. And look at as we bring over with this nice mass glass, the first step we do is to determine the diameter. Here at the museum, okay. Ooh, so it really depends. The glass makers you see all behind me are professionals, so they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for quite a long time already. Um, it just, glass blowing is like learning an instrument. It ultimately depends on you, on how much time and effort you put into it. If you have a good instructor, sure, that can go a long way, but ultimately it depends on you as yourself as an artist to push yourself. They usually say you need to spend 100 hours in a hot. No, this is not something they learned yesterday. This is something they've been doing. So here at the museum, we have two furnaces, and they're both holding approximately 1,000 pounds of glass. Notice that the one on the left-hand side, this furnace right now is running low on glass. So we're in the process of charging the glass. Here in these little barrels, we have these pellets of glass. We melt soda lime glass, which is the most common type of glass there is. Chances are the glassware in your home is made from this glass, but the one that we melt here is specifically different. It's produced about 45 minutes north of Tacoma in Seattle, called Spectrum Glass Nugget. This glass is specially formulated to stay at a molten state for a longer period of time. All that means is we have a longer working time with it. So this glass is specially formulated for glass makers. The 1,000-pound furnaces that we have are more on the rarer side. Most studios have about a 500-pound furnace, but here at the museum, this is a large scale, so we do have a lot of glass that we're melting here. And on our top screen, we're seeing a diagram, a breakdown of the furnace and what's really going on. If I open this door, it just looks red and orange, and it's kind of really hard to understand what's going on inside of there. It's about the same temperature as molten lava, but it's just yellow. When you have a trained eye, you can understand that there is glass inside of there, and I would say the glass level is right below the sill at this point. Now, these furnaces are never turned off, and that's one of the worst things that can happen here in the hot shop floor. We'll constantly refill them, ensuring that they're melting all year round. You know, I've never been told the number before, but also I believe it's because I'm always scared to ask what that number is to run. Yes, I am a professional glassmaker. I just enjoy talking to people, though. Nope, there is a lot of safety systems. This museum is, since we are a public education, this museum has a lot of safety systems that a lot of places usually wouldn't have. We have seismic meters down below the museum. We feel any movement from the ground, the gas is automatically shut off from the gas company. We have essentially computers regulating the amount of gas going through our chambers also. Typically, you won't see a lot of these safety systems in your typical hot shop, but due to that we are a public institution, we do a lot of safety procedures here. We also have emergency shut-off valves, which is more on the rarer side. On the both sides of the museum, we have these red buttons. You press on them, even on accident, the gas company will need to come out here and turn it on, and it will also turn off the gas to the furnaces. Usually you wouldn't have something like that. Another piece of equipment that I haven't really talked about too much is the glory hole down in the center of the hot shop. Now, the glory hole down in the center, unlike the furnace, is turned off at night. And this one essentially is a round barrel on its side lined with fire brick, made to insulate and keep the heat inside. It is also slightly hotter than the furnace, so it's about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. But again, we do turn this off at night. Typically, someone needs to come in about an hour and a half before the museum opens, just to turn them on so they're adequately hot enough when we begin to blow or work with glass. That's a fantastic question. So color is made. It comes to us in a solid bar form. I'm going to pass this around so we can pass it all around. We can understand what the bar is. Now, when you're purchasing glass as a glass maker, it's like going to a candy store. They sell every single color you could ever imagine. Depending on what we're making, we can use the full bar that's passing around, or we could just use a little bit. That will determine the density of the color. If we're gonna make something large, chances are we might use a full bar. Heck, we can even use 2 or 3 if we really like to, and just create a really dense color. Typically though, we will use an inch or 2. As we see down here in the sensor, we have the solid color on the end of the rod. The next step we will take with this one is to coat it and essentially stretch it out. The colors themselves are made by adding different metals of the periodic table. Would you like to see the color bar? Different metals produce a different color depending on what your favorite color is. If it's blue, we might add cobalt. Manganese can create a purple and black glass. Chromium can create a green glass. Really depends on what color. Antimonium can create a white glass, all depending on the color. Well, typically it's the size that will determine the density. A lot of bars look black because they're just transparent and they're so dense with color. We have our visiting artist, Katie Hancock, down here, and she's beginning to chop up the cane. This cane we will be using here very shortly. But before we get to that process, we do need to create a handful of them already broken up to smaller sections. If you stick with us, we'll see the whole process start to finish. If you're wondering how we make something large, something bigger, well, we're seeing that process down right in front of the furnace. We have Chuck with a black t-shirt. Now he's entered the furnace, he's turned, and he's gathered a thin layer of glass. What's gonna be happening down on the left-hand side with the massive glass that Chuck has, he will be stuffing a cup. This is one way we can apply color. Instead of having the color on the very inside of our piece, we have pushed it on the very outside. We will push it on the outside with this process down on the left-hand side. We have Tanner with Kevlar gloves. We will break the cup free from the rod, set it on the ground, and as Chuck comes over, he's gonna stuff the cup, fill it up bottom to top, and we have just applied that color on the very outside of our piece. To explain exactly what went on there, because it might seem like we just stuffed a regular cup. How does that make the difference between the color on the inside and outside? If we cross this, if we cut it in sections, we see a little example. Instead of having that color on the inside and with a lot of clear on the outside, we will push that color on the outside and all the clear glass on the inside. Right inside of it, actually. Right inside of it, what makes stuffing a cup difficult is that if Chuck makes any random movement, he can touch the side of the piece and create a giant air bubble. When you create a giant air bubble, might as well throw it away, start all over. It is possible to fix it, but usually, depending on the size of the air bubble, sometimes it's best just to start all over. Yes. Yes, exactly. It's a little difficult than it sounds. Do we have any further questions from the audience? Any questions that we might have about the process you are seeing here today? If not, it's totally fine. Remember to sit back, relax, enjoy the museum. I highly recommend the top balcony at one point or another. It's a great place to view the live glass making, and also just a great place to take any pictures or videos of the action going on. We do have an amazingly talented AV crew here that's always trying their best and working their best to give you the best shot on the top balcony, top screens. We do have this museum rigged up with cameras all around. If you want to continue to watch the live glass making from the comfort of your own home, well, you do have that opportunity. The Museum of Glass does live stream in HD, both on our website and on YouTube. So this museum is it's very different. It's iconic due to its cone-shaped design. There is studios, glass studios around the world that have this cone-shaped design because it is a functional hot shop. Hot air likes to rise, you create a natural chimney, and it exits towards the top. Since this museum is on a ridiculously large scale, we've added a fan to the top, which will just increase the function of hot air rising. So I typically say that the winter is the best time to be a glass blower because it's so cold outside and inside it's nice and warm. But here at the museum, due to this cone-shaped design, it's always a good time to be a glass maker. All year round, we're staying nice and warm. And then cool in the summers, exactly. And this is chimney design shape we have. Thank you so much for joining us. So here at the museum, we have a lot of studios here that you will never realize. Besides our hot shop we have here, on the very back of the museum, we also have a cold shop. The cold shop is where we can remove any punchy mark or residue that might be left behind by the glass. And we have that. We also have a fab shop, a fabrication shop down below. A lot of the stuff, if an artist comes in here and they need a special tool, we have Nick Davis down here, one of the finest tool makers in the country, where he can rig something up that we can make something work. Yes, we do. A lot of the stands that you see at the museum are also produced in-house. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, we have a handful of different things going on. I will touch bases on what we have going on, but again, if I lose you, my name is David, and I love questions. So you're always feel free to ask me as many questions as you like. The glass itself is starting off in our oven. Our oven that we have here is holding approximately 1,000 pounds of molten glass behind this door. When I open it, it just looks red and orange, and I know it's hard to understand what's going on inside of here, but essentially behind that door lies a ceramic pot where the glass sits. So you can think of the furnace as a hot bowl of soup that's always turned on. It's about 2100, about the same temperature as molten lava. We then have a glory hole down in the center. The glory hole in the center is slightly hotter than the furnace, about 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. The key difference between the furnace and the glory hole is turned off at night to save energy. Remember that furnace, 365 days a year, always running, doesn't take any holiday breaks, vacations, weekends off, sick time, no break time ever. It's always turned on. The equipment that you see here is also powered by natural gas, and that is our fuel source at the museum. We see on the end of the rod, we already have solid color. Our furnace only holds clear glass, and we intend to keep it that way. Down on this left-hand side, we have another furnace also holding 1,000 pounds. The key difference is that this one is running a little bit low on glass, so we're in the process of charging the furnace. The furnace itself is filled with melted pellets of soda lime glass. This glass is produced about 45 minutes north of Seattle, called Spectrum Glass Nugget. It's specially formulated to stay at a molten state for a longer period of time. All that means is we have a longer working time with it. It's not cooling down so fast. So our furnace is filled with hundreds of these small pellets that will melt overnight. And as you can tell, this furnace is in that process of being charged, being filled up with more molten glass. And we're seeing down here in the center the process of gathering glass, taking glass on the top layer and coating the previous color core. So I'll be roaming around the hot shop. If you have questions, just stop me, let me know. But we'll continue watching the live glass making. We are gonna produce a long strand of glass that will stretch from one end of the room to the opposite. This is called cane, and we will use them later in the process. Now the strand of glass that we've pulled out here, it's going to be broken up to smaller sections, and eventually we're going to roll them up. We're going to roll them up on the outside of a core of glass. That way we can get the striped effect design. But now notice we're beginning to see the true color of the glass. When we first started off, it was red and orange, and that is due to the heat of the glass. The heat will always distort the true color of the glass, but as you can tell, its true color is beginning to come back. The thickness that we're trying to go for is about the size of a number 2 pencil. That is what we're going for. We want to have an even, consistent pull all the way around also. And we lay them on these ladders that we have around here. These are just cooling racks, so they're not touching right directly on the concrete. Yes. How long will it take to melt? Well, just overnight is good enough. One thing we also do is our furnace typically stands around 2100 degrees. We'll actually increase the temperature to around 23 or 2200 degrees, just so the glass can continue to melt faster also. But tomorrow morning, I'm sure if we charge around every 30 minutes, tomorrow morning this furnace should be ready to go. Ooh, how much training? Well, a lot of different ways you can go towards it. There's about 50 colleges in the United States that teach glassmaking as an art form. That doesn't mean you'll become a professional. That just means you will learn how to work with glass as a media. Just like taking a ceramics or a pottery class or a painting class doesn't mean you're a professional, just means you know how to work with it. There's a couple also different ways. You can also go to a local glass studio here in Tacoma. We have just down the street, Area 253, and also Tacoma Glass Blowing Studio. You can go into one of those hot shops and ask the person, can you teach me glass? You can take a class or two, and eventually you'll be asked, hey, do you mind sticking around and helping me out make a piece? And that's typically how you start. Here in Tacoma, we are also incredibly lucky. Dale Chihuly is one of the major reasons why we have this museum. He was one of the founders, and he's also from this area. Dale went to the same high school I did, same middle school, and he's done a lot to help his local community. He also started a program called Hilltop Artists, a non-profit organization aimed to help out the troubled youth. Hilltop Artists teaches around 700 kids annually through the Tacoma Public School District. So we have after-school classes, daytime classes, summer classes, you name it, we work with your schedule. Hilltop Artists is based off in Jason Lee Middle School, and we also have a secondary hot shop at Wilson High School. So it can range from the age group of 12 to 21. If you live in this local area, Hilltop Artists is actually now taking summer applicants. I do have a stack of summer of applications if you would like to be part of the Hilltop Artists family. You do have to be a resident of Tacoma, however, and it have to be ages 12 to 21. We talk about here in the hot shop how we have a wonderful and a beautiful state-of-the-art hot shop here. But when the glass is broken free, there's always a residue mark. And we can see it on this cup here, the simple cup. On the very bottom, there's a weird kind of scratch mark, break-off mark. Here in this hot shop, we also have a wonderful cold shop. We have one of the best cold workers in the country, Kristen Elliott, and she's currently in the back, cold working some pieces. Throughout the day, we'll put up a live stream camera on the top screen to show you what is she up to and how she removes any impurities that might be left in the glass. As you see here, she's using grinding wheels, or she's actually already polishing the glass there using centuries-old wood cutting and polishing techniques. And again, Kristen is one of the best in the country. She's incredibly talented. Most of the big artists we hear in our local area, chances are Kristen's probably one of the few that are cold working all of their work. And again, we have a wonderful AV crew ensuring you get some of the best views here in the hot shop so we can understand what's going on. We have a bigger, massive glass that we're gonna stretch, very similar to what we were doing earlier, stretching the glass out from one end of the room, but we can see a handful of different colors down here and also on this end. This is all prep work that you're seeing here. We are gonna be using this later on today and also throughout our Visiting Artist KT's residency here at the Museum of Glass. Now, directly behind me, we're gonna go ahead and with a bigger pull that we see. The mask, notice that it's red and orange first of all on the start. Again, mask likes to hold heat, and heat will always distort true colors, make it look red and orange, but we now know it's not that true color. Its true color will come down will cool down. We will see it once the glass is properly cooled down. And notice down in the center, the glass is already beginning to take form of its true color. But essentially, we'll give it another 5 minutes and the glass will see that true color. So here we've broken our canes up and we've set them on this kiln shelf. What we're gonna be doing next is we're gonna roll on the surface to pick up these canes. So we're gonna pick up this actual pattern on some glass. Now, I know we've spent quite some time pulling this cane. We're wondering, well, what's made with it? How do you even apply it? We're gonna see that action here very shortly. The canes are set on a kiln shelf lined with some kiln wash. The kiln wash we use here is a local. We go down to Owens Beach, which is about 15 minutes here. We go to the clay mines and we grab a little clay, and that is what we use here at the Museum of Glass. We've lined it with that to prevent any stickiness that might occur when the glass gets hot. It's essentially a release agent that we have added. By heating them up, we just want a quick heat to ensure that the canes are fused together but have not melted. So all we are taking is a quick heat, ensuring that the canes are nice and happy. They're not gonna crack, they're not gonna break. And here in a little bit, with the heat of the glass being so hot, we can roll on the surface and pick all the canes all in one take. All right, well, I hope we're all ready. This is always the fun part. Cane roll-ups, oh, they are so gorgeous. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but again, we do have a professional crew down here. To ensure that we have an even heat all the way around, we are just going to flip the plate. That way, when we're heating them up, we're not just heating up the same canes over again. This is gonna ensure that we have an even melt all the way around. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any questions about what's going on? These canes are going to be joined together here very shortly. We're going to squeeze them, which is the next step, just to ensure that the canes have stuck to one another and that we don't have any rogue cane that might not be picked up on the first take, on the first roll. We noticed that little red and orange on the end of the plate. The canes have now, instead of being sharp broken, they have curled up, rolled up. We get rid of these little Forellis. The Forellis is the bits of glass that ensure that the canes will stay where they're at. And here we get ready for this time around, the last heat. Something's burning. Didn't get a good video. we gotta do it again. Oh, yes. So my name is David, by the way. I'll start all over, explain what's going on. If you have questions, just raise your hand or shout my name. If I lose you, just let me know, all right? I love questions, by the way, okay? So don't feel free to ask me as many questions because that's what makes my job amazing, is all the questions. I'm going to start off by introducing the equipment that we have here, just so we can all understand what's going on here, where and what we're doing. All the glass that you see here is being pulled out of our furnace. At the Museum of Glass, we have 2 furnaces. Both are holding approximately 1,000 pounds of molten glass. They're about 2,100 degrees, which is about the same temperature as molten lava. Now, it just may look like it's red and orange, but there's a lot more going inside. Again, essentially, it's a ceramic pot that we're melting. We then have a glory hole, which is the reheating chamber. This is the chamber that will reheat the glass and that we use to make the glass more malleable for us so we can continue to work. With the core of glass that we did, we picked up some canes. The canes are straight lines. We can see a lot of these canes right here. We've already stretched them out. We've already cut them up. But essentially, they're small little strands of glass that we use. This is how we create stripes or lines in glass. If we want, we can keep them straight, or we can also turn them so we can see like a wig-wag pattern. So many different ways we can approach the cane, but essentially it's how we create a straight line. Notice that the furnace down on this left-hand side is running low on glass, and we can tell that because we have a lot of glass pellets down here. The glass that we melt here at the museum is specifically formulated to stay at a molten state for a longer period of time. It's produced about 45 minutes north of Seattle, called Spectrum Glass Nugget. So it's a local nugget that we melt here at the museum. And this is specially formulated for offhand glass makers, again, so we have a longer working time. So this furnace for the whole day will not be used. We're going to continue to charge it, filling it up with more glass. But tomorrow morning, this furnace will be ready to go. So it's white canes that we are using. Yes, the very first ones. And those already chopped up. I believe we used a good majority of them. Yes, we did. But essentially, we will continue that process to get the desired effect that we are going for. I believe we are going to do a wig-wag effect, which means we're going to get a bunch of curves in the glass here. So the way that the chamber works here, the chamber will always heat up the very tip of the glass before anything else. So what we do is we dip the tip in water to counteract the chamber. That way, we have an even heat all the way around. Yes, so the very back part, even though it absorbs less heat, at this point, if we want to start the wig-wag from the very back, going up. So first we need to get the very back the hottest before we get the tip. The glass that you see on the rod is called the moil, and that was always going to get cold, or it will always get hot. And if we want to get it really, really hot, we have to quench it in water, which is the reason why we're adding water there, just so we have a longer time and we can get it even hotter than usual. Yes, that way we can maintain more controls. It will be colder, easier to turn, easier to work with. Nope, we just use room temperature water. If we need to fill it up, we can fill the bucket up. It doesn't matter. Even if it's hot water, it will still crack it. We're going to see another pull also here very shortly, another stretch of glass. So what we're making right now is another cane pull, but this time the canes have been bundled and re-pulled. If we can get even fancier by cutting this up and stretching it again, essentially. So we can get very fancy. Nope, this is gonna be re-stretched and then laid on a plate again and applied again. So this can get even more complicated. We can repeat this step 10 times if we really wanted to. That'd get us a really bunch of straight lines in a cane though. And I believe I do have an example. So if you're wondering essentially what we're making is we have this cane with the filled lines. I'm gonna pass it around so we can understand what's being made. But again, be careful with the edges. But that's what we're creating. In this case, notice that we're twisting a little bit. On the example we have, it is straight, so it has not been twisted. Now remember, this could be cut up again, re-stretched and returned again to repeat the same pattern. That would just give us a tighter twist and even more lines. Diameter all the way around. So KT is our visiting artist. She's the mastermind and the person in charge. On our top screen, we're going to play some of her work, some of her images, so we can understand what's going to happen eventually with all the prep work you see here today. What is the final result of what we're making here today? So on our top screen, we're going to get that up just so all our viewers can understand what's going on. And KT will be coming to the museum every Monday and Tuesday for the next month. For the next 4 weeks, KT will be our visiting artist. And so if you can't join us in person, remember you can always join us online. But let's see some of KT's work on our top screen now. Yes, the annealing cycle. The canes that you see here are thin enough that we don't need to do it, but they will be annealed later on. Yes, for the finished work, they will be annealed. In this case, they're also really small, so that temperature change won't happen as quickly. But yes, technically, this cane, we don't know when, maybe in 10 minutes or maybe in 100 years, it will break though. If you're wondering how we apply color to glass, well, we're seeing that process down here. We start off a starting bubble, then we come right on over with the solid color. The solid color is cut free. Now the important thing is to push the color nice and evenly around the bubble. That way it's evenly distributed. In the final piece, if we don't distribute it evenly, we will see different densities of color throughout the bubble. Once we gather clear glass on the surface, it will magnify the underlying color, and you won't even notice that it's not solid color. And most glass is always going to be playing this trick. Now, there is glass around the world that you might have in your home that might be solid color, but most of the times it is this thin layer of color that's sandwiched in between clear layers. We are now letting this bubble cool down, and by letting the bubble cool down, we're actually doing a handful of different things. The first thing is we can stabilize the core. The second thing is that we're giving ourselves the ability to gather more glass. The colder that core is, the more glass that can be added. But remember, when that hot core is added, by having that cold core, we're essentially maintaining more control. Now, typically after the gather, we will use a wooden block, and that's what we saw that wooden block being used. It's going to ensure that the bubble will blow out nice and evenly all the way around. When we're using woods here in the hot shop, yep, we use wood. So the wood we use here is fruit wood. We love burning cherry wood. Cherry wood smells like a barbecue here. That's an added bonus. Another shaping tool we use is a wet padded newspaper. That is the Wall Street Journal folded up, drenched in water, and we're gonna burn right through that newspaper. It only lasts a few days, but that's totally fine. We'll throw that pair away, and we'll just fold a new pair. We always ensure that that top layer is nice and moist by adding and continuing to add water throughout the day. And just like last time, we're letting that core cool down, but essentially we're just giving ourselves the ability to maintain more control. Instead of working harder and turning that rod faster and faster, just let it cool down. Take a few minutes, let it cool down. We don't have to work as hard. And we take that and yet another molten layer. Remember, when we blow our bubble out, you won't even notice that there is a thin layer of color. Now, even though these rods are specifically made not to absorb heat, they still build up a little heat. So we use cold water that we run on the surface of the rod, which in turn cools it down. If you take a close inspection of the rod, you can begin to see where the rod is hot. Towards the tip, it is no longer shiny. That stainless steel is no longer there. We begin to see a more dull gray and black. Typically, if you see that discoloration, chances are the rod is hot. That is the danger zone, and we won't place our hand there. Either it's directly behind it. How much BTUs? I don't know. I just know we go through 10 tons of glass a year. So now notice on this end, we're standing by blowing air through the blowpipe. If you're wondering how much air is blown, we're typically blowing about the same air pressure you use to blow out a candle. So it's not a lot of air, but again, it does vary. Sometimes we're asked to blow soft and gentle, and sometimes we're asked to blow hard. It all depends on how much we're trying to expand the bubble we have. We created a constriction or a break-off zone. It's a small waste point that you see. So if you're wondering how this piece will be broken free, we'll add a little bit of water or a little tap in that little crevice. We can go back and redefine it, but again, that small constriction is where the glass will be broken free later on in the process. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Museum of Glass. Thank you so much for joining us, especially our new group that we have here. Real quickly, I do want to introduce myself. I'm sure we have all met Andrew, right? We met Andrew. My name is David. If you have questions at any given time, you are more than welcome to ask me or Andrew. And yeah, we'll help you out. I will be explaining the glass process. Do you have a question already? Because I like that already. There's a lot of different safety equipment that you see around here, okay? And we'll make sure to explain exactly what's going on each time something different comes up, okay? Sounds good. But again, just raise your hand or shout my name. Do you have a question already? Yes. So we did learn a little bit about the glass that we melt here at the museum. That furnace right now is running a little low on glass, so we're in the process of charging it. We're filling it up with more glass. The glass that we melt here is produced about 45 minutes north of Seattle, called Spectrum Glass Nugget. So it's a local nugget that we melt here at the museum, and it is soda lime glass. Soda lime glass is the most common type of glass there is. Chances is any glass in your home is made from this same soda lime glass. The only difference is that ours is specifically formulated for offhand glass making. All that means is we have a longer working time with it. It stays hotter for a longer period of time. So to talk a little bit about the glass process you see here, we're gonna go ahead and move on to a different project. Earlier, we started the day by pulling these long strands of glass that we see here. Now, this is called cane. We can see different colors. We can see a beautiful blue, different greens. This stuff is then chopped up, broken up to smaller sections. As we see down here, we have a bin of white and we have a bin of green. So what we will do is we're gonna break these up to smaller sections. And the pieces that you see out in our gallery that have stripes, if they have stripes, typically this is how we will apply those stripes with the chopped up cane that we see. So this is what we're gonna take. We're gonna set it on a kiln shelf. We're gonna heat it up, and we're gonna roll on the surface to pick up these small little canes that we have here, all right? It's gonna be quite a unique process. We can see down here that the glass makers are already beginning this process. They're preheating the shelf that we will use. So down here, we have this shelf. We're gonna set the canes right on top of this plate we have here. Now, before we get to that process, I do want to take a second and talk a little bit about what the equipment you see here and what it does. Remember that the glass is being pulled out of this furnace. Now, this is about the same temperature as molten lava. So it's about 2100 degrees, and this furnace is never turned off. This is always on. So it doesn't take any breaks all year around. Very similar to the furnace, we have the glory hole. The glory hole is the chamber we use to reheat the glass. This is slightly hotter at 2300 degrees, so the longer time we spend inside, the hotter the glass gets. We can see that the canes are now being laid out on a kiln shelf. We're gonna get the glass nice and hot, and we're gonna roll on the surface to pick up all those small canes. Do you guys have any questions so far, now that we know a little bit about the equipment here? Again, I love questions, so you guys are more than welcome to ask me as many questions as you like. And also, Andrew, he's very knowledgeable. What heats the furnace? Natural gas. That is our fuel source here at the museum. I've never been told the number of how expensive the hot shop is. I always tell people, maybe it's because I'm a little scared to ask that number also. But yes, our fuel source is natural gas here at the museum. How do we make the glass? So the glass itself, do you play Minecraft, by the way? Have you ever played Minecraft? Do you know how to make glass in Minecraft? Do you know what you melt? Sand, correct. So essentially it's silica sand, which is the purest form of sand there is. We will take sand, and then we'll add soda ash and lime. Those three materials give us the glass that we melt here at the museum. So The way that we receive our glass, it's already pre-melted. It looks like an ice cube. So the manufacturer north of Seattle, again, has already melted all those ingredients together. And they have a special formula. It's like top secret. No one knows this formula. Besides, yeah, exactly, besides the people that work there. You guys have any other questions I can answer? So these torches we have here, they're used to heat up one specific area part of the glass. So here we have this fluffy torch. This is just a pilot light, so we can use it whenever we like. But we can take the trigger, pull it, and flame comes out. Again, it's one way we can concentrate the heat in one certain area. So notice down here, we're stepping back to our furnace. If we want to make something large, something big, it just means we need to take multiple dips into our furnace. And we can see down here that Brandon's heated up the glass sufficiently. And some of the next steps we will take is to roll on the surface, but we are going to manipulate this mass of glass before we move on to the next step. So down here we have a garage. This is a temporary place where we can store glass and keep it nice and warm. We are working with colored glass, and the colored glass comes to us in a bar form. This does need to be preheated, however. So we will set the color bar into the garage. In about 30 minutes, it should be ready to be used. So we can pass that around, okay? But essentially, the colors themselves are made by adding different metals of the periodic table of elements. So different metals will produce a different color. So depending on what your favorite color is, we will add a different metal. So we buy this from a manufacturer. Yeah, what's your favorite color? Red. Ooh, you have expensive taste. So red glass is some of the more expensive glass because we add gold to it. And you can see that in the price point. Typically, you would pay a little bit more for that gold content. You have a question all the way in the top? Why is it called the glory hole? Well, that is an old Italian name. Glass blowing that we see here is all Italian based, and that's where we get the name from. It's really old. So notice down here, Brendan has stepped back into the furnace, and he's taken another dip of molten glass. This is how we make that mass bigger. And by holding the glass straight down, we can get rid of excess glass, but also notice the shape that he's left with. It's nice and symmetrical. We've coated the glass evenly, and that's another reason why we hold the glass straight down. As we're heating up the canes, they lay on a little bit of kiln wash. Here at the museum, we don't use any crazy kiln wash. We just use natural clay from our local area, from the clay mines. So the glass doesn't stick to the actual tray itself. It's kind of like a release agent. To ensure that we get an even heat on our canes, we're actually going to flip the plate. That way we're not heating up the same canes over and over again. So it's called a kiln shelf. It's essentially a kiln shelf that we have on there. We call it a Pastorelli plate just because we're glass makers. But essentially, it is just a kiln shelf. It's very similar if you go to the Clay Arts Center around here. Uh, if you ever work with ceramics, the same thing that's inside of a kiln is what we're using here. Yep, this for the smaller pieces essentially. If we're gonna make something really larger, we can get a bigger shelf if we needed to. The museum has stacks of different shelves. Yes, I love questions, by the way. I love all of them. So what's going on right here is they're picking up some color for the next piece. Another reason is remember that this is a temporary spot where we can store the glass and keep it nice and warm. Earlier we made a cup inside of here. It's called a stuffed cup, and it looks very similar to the cup we have here. It's just a different size and different color. What's gonna happen is we're gonna stuff this cup. This way we can get two different patterns in one piece. So the cup will be set on the ground. We will come over with hot glass and we're gonna fill the cup bottom to top. All right, so I believe this is gonna be the next heat on which we roll on the surface of the cane. So we're gonna take the last heat. Again, we're not trying to melt these canes. We just want them sufficiently hot enough for them to stick to one another. All right, is everyone ready? We're gonna hold off on your question because we're gonna get ready to roll this up, all right? So on our top camera, we're also gonna get focused right here so we can show you what's gonna be going on here. All right, so here we go. We're gonna roll right on that very surface. And look at that pattern. We have just applied all the straight lines to the glass. So that really depends on the color and how decorative the cup might be. The cup was quite large, so I'm guessing it took around 30 minutes to make. So right now they're gonna be making the core that we use to go inside of the cup. So you're gonna see stripes on the inside of the piece. So we're gonna take our cup and we're gonna stuff that core we have now inside of the cup. Yes. Typically, if you're thinking about drinking water, you should probably drink water. We have a bunch of water like fountains around the museum also. It's very important to stay hydrated, but we do have this beautiful shape. If you guys haven't had a chance to look up, I highly recommend it. The Museum of Glass is iconic to Tacoma in our local area. because of this cone-shaped design. It's very large. Now there is hot shops around the world that have a very similar design, but they're just not this large. I mean, this one is incredibly large for a hot shop. Another reason why we have this cone-shaped design is that Tacoma was founded on a logging town. We used to export a lot of wood from this area. That logging industry is long and gone, but where we stand on the Foss Waterway, there used to stand wigwam burners or beehive burners. It was a place where they would burn excess wood. That's another reason why we have this cone-shaped design. But essentially, it's a natural chimney where hot air can rise. On the top, we have a fan that just sucks the heat away, which allows us to stay nice and warm all year round. And cool during the summer, too. It's very functional. I typically like to say that glass blowing is really fun during the winter because it's super cold and it's super hot inside of here. But due to this shape, it's always a good time to be blowing glass here at the museum. So right now the crew noticed that there was a little bit of debris stuck on the glass. Now we use kiln wash. Again, we go out to our clay mines here in Tacoma and we mine some clay, and that's what we use as our kiln wash. But even with that, some residue can still be left behind. So we use a diamond tip Dremel just to get rid of any debris that might still be on there. We are going to spend quite some time on this piece, so we want to ensure we have really good quality all the way around. Yeah, exactly. You know, if there's like a weird piece of chunk of glass on there and we spend the whole day working on it, we will always notice that. And, you know, we spend like 4 hours making a piece and there's a rock inside of there. Even if there's like a bubble in the furnace and we grab the bubble, we will still pull that bubble out of the glass and snip it free just so we have really good quality. A glass box? A pot? It depends. We always get asked like, well, how many pieces do you make a day? And it really depends on how decorative that piece can take. That decorative piece is. We can make a super complicated bowl that might take us like 4 hours to make. Or we can make a simple bowl in 20 minutes. It really depends the artist we have here and what we're trying to accomplish. Because we spent like a whole day making one single piece. That cup right there, 20 minutes. 20 minutes, I would say. Yep, that's a very simple design, just color overlaying glass on top. Yes. Do you want some? These aren't mine, sweetie, unfortunately. I would give you some, but they're not mine to give. I hope so. You have a question? Well, it depends on the pattern again. If we want this pattern and then we want another color on the inside and then another color on the outside, we can do that. It will take a longer time to do that. Well, right now on the left-hand side, we're working on a different project, but essentially the pieces that we make for that project will use here today, or at least during our visiting artist residency. I do want to show some images on our top screen so we can see what we're making, because I know right now we're making a lot of prep work, a lot of experimental work. If you're wondering, well, what eventually is all this going to become? On our top screen, we are going to show you some images of our visiting artist work. We're going to hold off for a quick second because I know there's some action going on, but later on we will show you what the final result will be. We always get asked about the rods that we use here, and they're made out of stainless steel, which is a very poor conductor of heat. Here we have a custom-built rod that KT, our visiting artist, made, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but it's made out of stainless steel. It's a very poor conductor of heat, and notice how, well, this rod is quite new. We've only used it like 2 or 3 times, but notice that towards the tip, it's discolored, right? It's beginning to discolor. If there's a discoloration going on in the rod, we won't place our hand in this area. Rather, it's directly behind that. And we can see that going on behind me with Brandon. Notice where his hands are at. They're directly behind the discoloration of the rod. That is where the rod is still warm, and safe to turn on. We want to make sure that the very tip, all the canes come together in one point. So we're just going to get rid of the very top half, that very small little section. That way all the canes will be coming together in one point. And this, of course, is for aesthetic reasons. That's a great question right there. Do we recycle glass? If it contains clear glass, we won't recycle it. I'm sorry. If it contains colored glass, we won't recycle it. Our furnace only holds clear glass, and we intend to keep it that way. A little bit of color can go a long way. So if we drop a little bit of white in our furnace, maybe the next two pieces we might make might have some white in it. So the only glass that we do recycle here at the museum goes into a specifically marked bin. I can see you, and I'm gonna come to your question here in a bit. Down here we have this bin. This is the only clear glass that you recycle, or that we recycle here at the museum. When you're working with recycled glass, every time it's remelted, you're getting a poor quality melt because more of the stabilizers that they use are being burnt out. So you get a poor quality every time. That's why here at the museum, we keep it about less than 20% recycled mix, just so we have a good quality glass. So when glass is complete, when we're done making whatever we want to make, it will need to slowly cool down, coming back to room temperature. If we leave the glass out here without cooling down, it can get too cold too fast, and it can break, crack, and even explode. So if we want to prevent it from breaking, we'll have to slowly bring it back to room temperature. This glass that you see here, these canes, they're thin enough that we don't have to anneal them, but we never know. These canes might break in 5 minutes, or maybe 5 or 500 years. All we know is at one point in their lifetime, they will break, but these will be annealed later on. And all glass throughout history has always gone through this annealing cycle. The difficult thing about glass in its history was it was never hard to make glass. It was hard annealing it and keeping it from breaking. That took, in history, when you look through history, that was the longest thing that took to develop. Well, glass occurs naturally. When lightning hits sand, it can occur naturally. The glass as we see it, probably around the height of the Roman age. Glass dates back to the Egyptians, however, when they were just melting glass and putting them on beads. But it's actually unknown exactly how old is glass, because you can't carbon date it. Typically, when they carbon date glass, they carbon date the things around it, but who knows if that glass was maybe made 50 years before or 50 years after. You guys have a lot of good questions, by the way. It was a... Yes? Well, it depends on the glass. Crystal glass was very popular maybe 30, 40 years ago. Nowadays, it's not as popular because it is, if you have crystal glass and you leave something in there for a long period of time, the lead does leak into your drink. However, the glass that we see here is quite stable. Even uranium, a fun fact is the way that we get rid of uranium waste is that we actually put it in glass and we bury that underneath the ground. The glass will stabilize it and keep it from leaking out into the environment. And another thing that was really cool about glass and what made it really popular is back in the olden day, if you wanted something that was just straight that was with that drink, if you had ceramic, it might leave a little bit of taste there, but glass would just be that real taste. And that's another thing that made it really popular. Plus, it was see-through, so you could see exactly what you were drinking. No problem. Do we have any other questions? Yes. So all around this hot shop floor, we have these annealers, and it's the cool down ovens. So here we have a top loader. We call it a top loader since we load the glass from the top, and they come up to 920 degrees to cool down. We then have a front loader, hence the name front loader since we load the glass from the front. These ovens are also great to make turkeys. It's just like a home oven. Around Thanksgiving, we've been known to do that. But again, so this piece of equipment down here, the garage, where we temporarily store our glass, people make pizzas out of that too. So yeah, we have a lot of fun down here. So, so the little sprayer we see here, we have these torches, but we also have compressed air. So it's just air that we place on the glass to cool down one certain spot of it. Have a question? All these pieces we're going to use later. So this is the cane work that we're going to use. Earlier we used white, we have some green, we have some blue, and I believe we have a black laying around. The ladders are cooling racks. That way the glass is not cooling right on the concrete, which can crack. That way it has a little bit of cushion. It's just so the canes have an easier place to cool down from. So when we're complete with the glass piece down here, there's always a little bit of residue that's left on the very bottom of our piece. And can we all see that, the little kind of weird scratch mark? If you're wondering how can you tell if it's handmade glass, typically if you look at the very bottom and you see some type of residue, that's a good sign that it's handmade glass. Here at the museum, we have one of the best cold workers in the country. We have Kristen Elliott. Now she works directly behind this cold shop, in this hot shop, in a cold shop where she gets rid of any residue or mark that might be left in the bottom of the glass. And again, we have a really amazingly talented cold worker. So earlier we made that cup. You guys remember I was talking about the cup that we're gonna make. So we're gonna break our cup free and we're gonna set it right on this little mold that we have here. Our camera's gonna focus on this little area, this little ring. We're gonna go ahead and stuff our cup. We're gonna fill our cup bottom to top. And this is how we're gonna get both our patterns together. So you had asked earlier, are we gonna see that? We're gonna see that right now here in a bit. The little ring. So what's going on is that it's cold right now, so we're preheating it to ensure when the glass meets the stand, it's not gonna crack it. So we break the cup free, it's set on the mold, and then we will come right on over with the core, and this is how we're gonna put both of those patterns together. So what's going on right now is we're ensuring that the core and the cup have fused together. Make sure they're one piece. We're also using this torch to seal the very back part. So the very back part of the cup is where it's the coldest. So we're heating that part as we roll to ensure that both pieces of glass have fused together. How long does it take to learn glassmaking? It is a lifetime thing. You don't learn really quickly. One funny thing is I was told at 5 years you feel like you know what you're doing, and at 10 years you realize you don't know anything at all. So, are you guys from around here? From Tacoma? Olympia in Centralia. Okay. Yes. How long does it usually take? I would say about 6 years or 7 years. You have good hand skills about that. You have a question? But it is possible. I've seen some glass makers, very little experience, but they're really, really good. So it all really depends on each person. Oh, yes, questions. If they get it too hot, the glass can just fall on the ground. This is this is the highest level of professional glassmaking around the world. So things like that don't happen too often here. Yeah. But they have in the glass industry, yes. You have a question, sweetie? I am so sorry, sweetie. They're not mine to give, unfortunately, though. So another shaping tool we use here is the wet padded newspaper. Now, here at the museum, any old newspaper will do, but we do prefer the Wall Street Journal, but again, any old newspaper will do. If you have some of that stuff in your home, bring it down here. We can happily dispose of it for you. It will be burnt, folded, of course, first, and then drenched in water. If you're wondering how the glass is broken free from the rod, well, we've created a small waste point, a constriction. That is how the glass will be broken free. Well, it's now time to use our mold with a little bit of newspaper adjusting everything. But here very shortly, we'll bring over our steel mold that we can only use once. Then it will join the glass. Look at that. With a little water and a little tap, the piece is broken free. And the next step is to set it off into the annealer. The annealer is the oven that will bring the glass back to room temperature. Unfortunately, if we leave the glass out here, it could get too cold too fast, can break, crack, and even explode. So if we want to prevent it from breaking, we'll have to slowly cool it down. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us in our morning live glass blowing demonstration. We will now be taking our lunch break.